If you've been searching for the best mini LED TV of 2024, well, I'll just come right out and say it, at least for bright room viewing. As someone who's reviewed countless displays this year, nothing can beat the Sony Bravia 9. In terms of the overall package for brightness, accuracy, and user experience, it's the best of the best. And if that's all you wanted to hear, well, I'll have an affiliate link to all the different sizes of the Bravia 9 in the description below and in a pinned comment for your convenience, which does give a kickback to the channel. But as always, there's more to the story, and this time that story is more of a 9-part mini-series. TVs in general have gotten much better this year, and with the 65-inch Bravia 9 I'll be reviewing today coming in at a very high price of $2,699, is it really worth it, or are you better off saving your money to buy more affordable options, or even picking up an OLED? Well, let's find out. And first we got to talk about the specs, as this is a 65-inch 4K 120 Hz plus VRR blue, green, red VA panel mini LED display with I counted 1,512 local dimming zones, has their XR processor, does support HDR10, Dolby Vision, and HLG, and along with the $26.99 price right now for the 65-inch variant, it also comes with a 1-year limited warranty. So specs are similar to other mini LEDs, but Sony has one big advantage in the Bravia 9, and that's their more advanced backlight control system. I could go into detail, but suffice it to say, they definitely are able to get far more granular with each local dimming zone for far higher accuracy, as well as better contrast. So 1,500 zones on a Bravia 9 could be comparable to something that has maybe 3,000, 5,000, or even 10,000 zones on a competing display from other manufacturers, so do keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to the connectivity, here's an image of what that looks like. Pause if you need to. Yes, it comes with the standard Ethernet, USBs, etc., all that stuff, but what I want to focus in on is the HDMIs. These are the things you're going to be putting your dirty hands all over every single day. Well, hopefully not every day, but in any case, there is one problem I have with this setup. It does have 4 HDMIs, that's great. However, there's only 2 that appear to support 4K 120 Hz, and one of them is an eARC port. So once you put your soundbar into that, you're effectively left with what appears to be just one usable 4K 120 Hz in, and that really sucks, because that means you basically are only going to be able to plug in one console for high refresh rate gaming. Now, that's not going to affect most people, but it is something you should keep in mind. And I do want to mention real quick that the overall design of this TV is quite good. It does have some pretty thin bezels, and the back is pretty nice as well. And with the feet being able to be put to the very edges of the display, I do think it looks very clean. And honestly, I'd like to see other manufacturers offer a similar mounting solution, and you should be able to mount it on your wall as well. But with all that stuff out of the way, now let's talk about the color, because if you do want some good color, look no further. The Bravia 9 produces excellent and vibrant hues when it needs to, but what separates it from others is the accuracy in which it displays gradients at all brightness levels, especially in the professional mode, which gives a very true to life reproduction, ensuring the closest possible match to the creator's intent. Movie buffs will love this TV, and in my opinion, this is probably the closest you're gonna get to the per pixel accuracy of something like an OLED. Taking a look here at the actual accuracy itself out of the box, we can see here that it's pretty good and doesn't need too much adjustment, but you can actually adjust a few things to get it to be nearly perfect. I mean, take a look here. You're getting excellent EOTF tracking, excellent RGB balance, and you're also getting good colors as well in SDR. And even in HDR straight out of the box, it's also very good. Take a look here. All 3 of those categories are once again very good, with only minor deviations on the EOTF curve in the professional mode. Also, in terms of color volume, you do get pretty good results. Now, I did measure around 95% DCI-P3, although it's possible it could be clamped in the professional mode, and perhaps if it was unclamped, you could get even slightly higher than that, though I have seen slightly better results out of other mini LED TVs, so it's not the best, but it certainly is very good and will give you very accurate color. Speaking of accurate color, taking a look here at the color checker analysis, well, we can see that it is giving an average delta E of just 1.4, making it very accurate for color representation. But enough about the color, let's move on to the brightness and HDR impact, a big reason why you would consider picking up a mini LED TV in 2024. And here the Bravia 9 absolutely crushes it, creating searing highlights without the compromise of dimming that plagues OLED TVs, leading to overall better and more consistent results in a bright room. In fact, I was able to completely open my blinds as well as have 3 studio lights on the TV, and it still seemed to be giving out a pretty acceptably bright image, fighting all of that incoming light. That's something that a lot of OLEDs are going to struggle with, and a huge advantage here, especially when you take a look here at the peak window brightness measurements. You can see it's no joke. The Bravia 9 is coming in as the 3rd brightest mini LED TV that I've ever tested, giving 797 nits in a 100% window and 2,989 in a 10% window. But more impressively, take a look here at a real scene. Baldur's Gate 3 at a D65 white point. The 65-inch Sony Bravia 9 is the brightest overall TV that I have ever measured, and that's something I was not expecting to see. It's even beating out the TCL QM8, and that thing is rated to hit over 5,000 nits in a 10% window based on my previous measurements of those window tests, making this technically, based on this gaming result, probably the best TV for bright room in terms of contrast and HDR impact. However, I do think it's worth keeping in mind that if you take a look at something like the LG G4, it's technically not that far off, but is that slight brightness bump worth it for the other things that OLED does better? And speaking of something that OLED does better, we gotta talk about the contrast. The contrast on the Bravia 9, in my opinion, is the best of any mini LED display that I have ever seen. Their backlight control for this TV is definitely the best I've seen. It really has excellent control, and they've fine-tuned the algorithm to try and make any blooming the least noticeable possible. However, it can still be noticeable when doing tests trying to look for it, and it might be the case that perhaps when viewing some very dark content and maybe it has some subtitles, you might see some blooming. And in order to fix that, they'd have to massively increase the zone count, something I'd like to see in future models. But one thing that Sony has absolutely nailed this year is the 24p Judder control. The handling on this TV is the best I've seen from any TV. You have a lot of different options to choose from when it comes to smoothing out films shot at 24 FPS, suffering from some horrendous judder. And even in the worst case scenario, if you max it out, it can get rid of the absolute worst judder without too much soap opera effect. But most impressively, it has an auto setting. This is crazy, which can adjust on the fly to de-judder the image. That's something that I could see some folks making their buying decision over. That is awesome. Seriously, the auto de-judder is no joke, and I'll be keeping that in mind when buying my next TV. But now we gotta talk about gaming. If you're looking for a gaming display, the Sony Bravia 9 will certainly get the job done, but when compared to OLED, it definitely falls short. Not only is it locked to just 120 Hertz on PC, which is fine, but even on console gaming, it's just gonna be a bit slower in terms of latency than the best gaming TVs. Keep in mind, your results may vary. You'll wanna go ahead and toggle between game mode and turn off some other settings to get the best results, and you could get better results than what I saw myself, but I have to report what I saw. And it has way slower response times. This means that fast-moving objects will look quite blurry when compared to OLEDs, which is to be expected of mini LED, but I think there's definitely room for improvement. That said, I wouldn't skip over it entirely just because of gaming. However, now let's talk about the clarity. And in terms of clarity, I gotta say overall it is pretty good. It does have a blue, green, and red subpixel arrangement, which is not something that Windows would expect to see if you were to use it as like a monitor, but it's definitely better than OLED subpixel arrangements, and this does lead to, in my opinion, fairly good text overall. It could be possibly a little bit better, but it's certainly not bad. But speaking of clarity, let's talk about the finish. Now, I do think the finish they used is pretty good. It does give you a pretty clear picture. It's what I would consider to be a glossy finish, meaning that yes, you are going to get a far more clear and vivid image than what you would get out of a matte coating. However, their glossy coating for some reason has an anti-reflective coating that bizarrely might be worse than having no anti-reflective coating at all. Now, this is going to be highly dependent on your situation. It's possible that this anti-reflective coating could actually be way better than none in your specific scenario, but in my scenario where I was using studio lights, as you can see, the strength of these lights does lead to a rainbow effect on the image, so keep that in mind when you are placing this in a room. But now let's talk about viewing angles, because this is a huge problem for mini LED, and after spending some time with the Bravia 9, to be honest with you guys, I think this has the best viewing angles I've ever seen out of any mini LED TV, even better than some ADS Pro models that I've seen before, which those notoriously have far better viewing angles than other mini LED TVs. So I'm not entirely sure what Sony has done here, but this has excellent viewing angles for a mini LED TV. Not quite as good as OLED. Certainly it does lose some contrast in color when viewed from the sides or up and down, but it is significantly better than any other mini LED I've seen in the past. So that is really awesome to see. And in terms of the audio, the Bravia 9's pretty good here as well. It has a fairly natural timbre, and it can get pretty loud without introducing significant distortion. However, it just doesn't have the clarity or presence of a good dedicated setup. Don't get me wrong, it's solid, and even the bass does have some rumble, but it just doesn't fill the room enough and sounds slightly muffled to me as someone who's been spoiled by some pretty high-end audio experiences throughout my lifetime. Let's talk about next the firmware in the menu and potential issues that might pop up. Now, I did have a bit of trouble getting 120 Hertz to work on PC, which was very bizarre, but after unplugging my second monitor, restarting both the TV as well as the PC, I did end up getting it to work, and after that, it worked flawlessly. And that's it. This TV was near flawless in terms of the firmware in my testing for everything else I tried. Overall, the Sony Bravia 9 is a tough TV to review. On the one hand, it's definitely the best mini LED TV of 2024. In fact, it's one of the better TVs in general for 2024 when you consider the whole package, especially their auto motion setting. That's awesome. However, the price is just way out of line. Sony is asking for roughly double the price of something like the TCL QM8, and it's nowhere near twice as good. More concerningly, at $2,699, the 65-inch model is currently $400 more than the 65-inch LG G4, at least when I last checked both their sales, and that's just wild. The LG G4 is outright a better TV in terms of image quality, and it's not necessarily a super tight race. While both TVs produce excellent HDR imagery, and the Sony Bravia 9 is technically a better bright room TV, it's not by a huge amount. Meanwhile, the LG G4 crushes it in terms of contrast, response times, kind of viewing angles, reflection handling, refresh rate a bit, and even the latency is better, at least in my testing, meaning for gaming and dark rooms, the LG G4 is the clear winner. It gives you a better picture, and it's cheaper. Unfortunately, as great as the Sony Bravia 9 is, even at its reduced price of $2,699.99, its price itself completely out of the conversation, and in my opinion, it needs a massive, probably $500 to $700 price drop at this size to make it something I would recommend purchasing. Now, at larger sizes like 85-inch, it's definitely a lot less out of line, and I would highly consider the 85-inch when compared to an LG G4, but even then, Sony wants around double the QM8's 85-inch price, and I still feel like at $39.99, that 85-inch is just a bit too close to the, I believe I've seen between $4,500 to $5,000 on the 83-inch, though correct me in the comments if I'm wrong there, on the LG G4. And I feel like even the 85-inch would need a small price reduction for me to strongly recommend that one. So if you're interested in the Bravia 9, I would highly recommend looking at the Bravia 7, as it seems like based on other reviews I've seen, it will get pretty close to the Bravia 9 in terms of picture quality while costing far less. And I think I would feel a lot more confident recommending the 7 over the more expensive 9, which appears to be suffering from diminishing returns. I'm just hoping that soon we'll see even more price drops on the Bravia 9, as well as a 98-inch version, hopefully sometime in 2025, because I think they could have a very strong argument for a 98-inch Bravia 9. So overall, great TV, just a little too expensive, and for that reason, I think I'm gonna have to give it, and this is a tough one, guys. I'm kind of going between a 6 or a 7. It would almost be unfair to give it a 6 because of how good it is. So I'm gonna give it a reluctant 7 out of 10 just because I was so impressed with what they did with mini LED technology. And make sure you're subscribed for everything else display related here on The Display Guy. Whether you're looking to connect a new console, gaming PC, or just need a fast and reliable HDMI cable to connect over long distances, Rupro has you covered with their certified 8K HDMI 2.1 fiber optic cable available in sizes of up to 50 feet and can deliver a perfect full 48 gigabits per second connection over distances other cables could only dream of reaching. And with 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth, it can easily drive 8K 60 FPS or 4K 144 FPS 10-bit HDR video through its ultra-thin, flexible, and durable housing, and it even supports ER. So if you're in the market for a cable that can drive a beautiful new TV or monitor, be sure to check out Rupro on Amazon today.